people telling you not to film at protests or not to share footage from them are wrong, and I'm going to show you exactly why. First, let me preface this by saying I fully understand the concerns and the risks here, okay? I have documented organizers in many different ways for years. I understand why people give this advice, but at this moment in time, I do not believe that it is the best advice. The number one piece of advice I give people is if you're going to something like this, assume you will be filmed. You will be filmed while you're there. You will be filmed on the way there, on the way back from there. Assume it. And from there, make your choices accordingly. If you're worried about being identified publicly or by malicious private citizens, that's perfectly understandable. Take steps to mitigate that. Wear a costume, wear a mask. Though there is power in not being afraid to show your face and what you stand for. And the more people who do, the harder it is for people to target or hone in on a single individual. However, understand that authorities will be filming you, and they have access to basically all the CCTV they could ever dream of. And they have state-of-the-art facial recognition technology. If they want to identify you, they will identify you. If you're carrying any sort of device with connectivity abilities, you're being tracked. It is ultimately inescapable. And while you can do things like leaving the phone at home or covering your face, there are ultimately trade-offs, like the inability to call someone in the case of an emergency, the inability to be tracked by your loved ones should you be taken somewhere with your devices. In fact, I personally carry an extra tracking device for my loved ones in case they need to find out where I am, because the last time I was taken to jail, my phone was turned off and they had no idea where I was. Now, is that the right choice for everyone? No, but in the same way that leaving everything at home is not the right choice for everyone either. Be aware of how these different surveillance technologies work and what best practices are when you're going to be around them. But right now I want to focus on the camera issue, because while this war, so to speak, or fight is being waged on several fronts, at this point in time, it is still primarily informational. You may remember I recently talked about informational autocracy, which is of course related to this idea, as well as my recent post on tactical frivolity and the purpose that the frogs in Portland are serving. First reason why documentation is important, and a lot of people do understand this, including the people who say document but don't share publicly, is for evidentiary reasons. You want to be documenting actions and behaviors in both offensive and defensive ways. That means, evidence of their crimes, but also if they accuse someone of them. Not only do we know how often body cams can accidentally not be recording at the perfect moment, do you really want them to be the only people with access to a copy of what happened? Recently, a woman named Marimar Martinez was shot in Chicago by ICE 5 times. They immediately publicly claimed that they had been boxed in by 10 cars, that she had tried to run them over and was armed and dangerous. They claimed it was all in self-defense. However, people who reviewed the footage said that there were 2 cars present, they rammed into her car, and then the officer said, "Do something, bitch," before jumping out of the car and shooting her 5 times. It's also reported that when another officer asked, "Hey, what happened?" the guy pointed at the body cams and said, "Don't speak, you're good." It's also worth noting that in their own criminal complaint against her, they didn't even mention the weapon that they were making claims about to the general public. A U.S. Army vet, George Retz Jr., who was wrongfully arrested by ICE, held in jail for 3 days, and denied access to a lawyer for that time, wrote an op-ed about his experience once he was released without charge. Now, ICE is claiming that he was arrested for assaulting an officer. I don't know about you, but I can't think of many cases where someone who has allegedly assaulted an officer is just let go without charge or explanation. They are more than prepared to make false claims. They're already doing it, and they cannot be the only source of evidence that we have in these cases. But I would argue that documentation is just as important, if not more so in some cases, because of their use of media. Above all else, their power lies in their narrative. And that's not just how we got here today, but it's also why they keep doing things like violating the Hatch Act. There's a reason why Kristi Noem was able to pump out a video so quickly blaming Dems for the shutdown to be played at TSA. There's a reason why Fox News is using footage that is 5 years old from Portland to legitimize what's going on, and why the Portland Frogs are such an effective tool. You know that horrific building raid in Chicago where they descended from Black Hawk helicopters, where they kicked doors in the middle of the night and dragged people from their beds, including U.S. citizens and children, who they zip-tied and then threw in the back of a truck? Yeah, did you know that they filmed it? And then they turned it into a propaganda video. Notice that the sound that they use is largely helicopters and heroic music. On our side, we have witness testimony, so we understand what went down. But can you imagine if we had footage from that raid? Footage where you could see children being torn out of bed in the middle of the night. Footage where you could hear them screaming and their parents crying as they were getting zip-tied and thrown in the back of trucks for hours. These people know how powerful it is to be the ones holding the camera and in the edit room. They know how powerful it is to be the ones who decide what people can see or access. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going after media companies this hard. They literally have documentary crews going on raids with them. MSNBC just talked about this.
Indiscriminately rounding people up, and then with their documentary crew, which is, I think, a generous way to describe it, making these slick-looking videos in order to try to convince people all around the country that this is some massive effort to rip the worst of the worst off the streets.
But guess what? I found footage of this exact moment from another angle. By the way, what did I say about CCTV? You can see that right after the ICE officers, their little personal documentarian jumps out of the van behind them, making sure to get all the best angles that you can put together for the most heroic cut. Hell, now we're up against AI. And if you don't think that they're perfectly comfortable with using AI to further their narrative, boy, do I have a bridge to sell ya. It's AI. It doesn't exist. Boy, that joke works even better these days. Protest, though there are many forms of it, is largely about sending a message, and media has always been an important piece to that. And now it's even more important. This isn't just about spreading a message or awareness or getting other people to join. They are telling a story, and we also need to be telling a story, the real story. At the very least, we need to be ready to counter any sort of false claims or misrepresentations they make. Traditionally, you needed to get the media's attention in order for word to get out and hope that they would cover it somewhat fairly or accurately and that the message would actually come across. Why else do you think people make signs? Everyone who's there knows why they're there, but the signs are for everyone else. But now, in many ways, we are the media. And the less we can rely on the media with a capital M, the more responsibility that we have to take to ensure that this is seen and shown accurately. In fact, a lot of the footage and photos they use and end up reporting on comes from us. Our role has changed. It has expanded. And besides, I can guarantee you, because I see it every single time, that the other side has individuals that show up to these things and try to agitate and document and make up their own lies. Being passive on this is not an option. And this is, by the way, in many ways a numbers game, because the more footage there is and various different angles there are of an event, the harder it is to make false claims about it. The harder it is to fake with AI, and the harder it is to censor and take down. If there's only one clip or angle of an event, once it gets flagged, it gets buried. The more angles and versions there are, the more verifiable it becomes, the easier it is to check any lies or misrepresentations, and the more likely it is to be seen. Yes, there are risks and very valid reasons why you may not want to be documented partaking in certain things. But there's also a chance that that's going to become a lot more dangerous before long. And while we still have this ability, we cannot let their narratives go unchecked or unchallenged. Take whatever steps you need to take as an individual to stay safe, but remember, this is far bigger than you or me. And right now, the primary battle is about truth.